So hi, this is Nick Williams sitting here with Sarah Rosentuler. Hi, how are you doing?
Hi Nick, very well, thank you.
Good. I'm really looking forward to this conversation because you're the author of a book called Life-Changing Conversations, and I'm just so passionate about the idea of having great conversations, and obviously you are because you've written a book on the subject. So tell me a bit about where your passion for the subject of great conversation comes from.
So it comes partly from the experience of my own life lived. I've sometimes struggled in the past to have what in the book I call big conversations, so these life-changing conversations, conversations that I know might well affect not only my own life but the life of other people as well. And I've sometimes waited not days or months but years to have big conversations.
Well, most people listening to this can relate to that.
Yeah, so I know I've avoided them. I've seen, in my work as a business psychologist, I've seen clients avoiding having conversations. So that's on the more negative side, but on the more positive side, I also know that through having meaningful conversations and inspiring conversations, it makes me feel much happier. And in the workplace, I think it makes people more creative and more productive.
I've been thinking a lot about the word kind of engagement recently, and there's the kind of thing of employee engagement, which I'm not particularly interested in, but just wanting to be engaged with each other and engaged with life. And really conversation is the way we do that, isn't it? We talk about engaging in conversation. So I guess by being in meaningful conversation, parts of us get engaged. Would that be right?
Yeah,
your experience?
Absolutely. I think it is through conversation we engage both hearts and minds, really. And I think through face-to-face conversation in particular, person-to-person conversation, it could be over a telephone call, it could be via Skype, then that is particularly meaningful, can be particularly fulfilling in a socially networked world where it sometimes feels much easier to send the email or do a text or a tweet, but I just don't think you can beat face-to-face conversation.
No. And I guess our life does evolve conversation at a time. Would you say that? One of our friends, Robert Holden, talks about that kind of idea that we evolve a conversation at a time. Do you subscribe to that idea? Is that your experience?
I do, very much, because I know, again, in my own life, when I've actually managed to call up the courage and have the conversation rather than avoid it, then I've always felt better about myself. It's almost, my sense sometimes is it's like having the conversation is the threshold that I've got to cross in order for the next chapter in my life to
Beautiful
begin.
way of putting it. And I love the way that you talk about, in a way, the art of conversation, because there's probably some ideas and some structure, which I guess I haven't had the opportunity to read your book yet fully, but there must be some kind of guidelines and structures you can put in place, and there's a whole art of it that I guess almost like sometimes conversations must just emerge. You don't even know you're going to have a conversation sometimes, but by engaging, the conversation emerges. Is that your experience?
Yes, conversation, I think, is it's deeply fascinating, and it is somewhat paradoxical as well, the challenge of it, because I think on the one hand there's a lot we can do to prepare for having a big conversation. It really helps and makes a difference to go in with a game plan and consciously thinking through some strategies and tools, which I have covered in the book. But the paradox is that I think once we actually encounter the other human being, to a large extent we have to let that go and then just step into the moment and trust our intuition and kind of do the dance with the other person. Because if it's a true conversation, it's a co-creation, and neither of us, or none of us, if there's more than two of us, are actually in control.
No, it's almost like it has, I almost get the sense when you're speaking, it's almost like a conversation has a life of its own, and we're almost like instruments of the conversation. Is that your experience?
Yes, it very much so. And actually, if we take the word dialogue itself, so it comes from the Greek dia, meaning through, like the diameter is a line that goes through a circle, and then logos, which has different translations, but one of them is the word. So in dialogue, it's the flow of meaning that comes through the words. But I think that word through is absolutely key, because I think in the most creative conversations we give voice to what is coming through us, not just what is coming from our memory or thoughts that we've churned out hundreds of times before.
So there's a genuine spontaneity and creativity, or co-creation, as you say, in the moment when you're having a really wonderful conversation.
Yes, and that is both the fantastic opportunity, and it's the challenge, because it's unpredictable. And you know, my ego, finds it challenging when I'm not in control. So there's that double edge to it.
And what is it that you love about your work? Because you take your work into organisations with individuals and groups around conversations. What lights you up about doing that? I'm curious.
Well, I think the highest performing teams that I've worked with are the ones that are able to have challenging, creative, inspiring conversations where they get fresh ideas for whether it's about developing new products or services. So that I find deeply inspiring, and I think that there are structures that can be put in place. There's choreography that can be done in the conversation that maximises the chances of that happening. There are no guarantees. And then, in another scenario, I find it very fulfilling when, for example, people are working in silos and they're not having, maybe two teams aren't talking to each other, and there's a real loss of productivity. Work is getting duplicated, mistakes are being made. So to bring, in that case, two teams together to have the conversation, for, the lights to go on around, we are losing productivity here, it's just, again, it's deeply fulfilling in a different way.
Wonderful, great. Well, thank you for taking the time to have this conversation. So your book is called?
Life-Changing Conversations.
And it's out in March, isn't it? March
it's
2012.
Out in March, yes.
Great. Well, thank you very much indeed for taking the time to talk. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Nick.
Thanks. Hope you enjoyed it.